We are live. Welcome to your Lovecraft Country weekly podcast. It's Monday night, guys. Unfortunately, Sundays have been quite rough on me, so I was not able to do the podcast last night, so I'm doing it now. Gonna post it in the groups tomorrow. Thank you for all of you who have been listening to the podcast, live cast, whatever you want to call this, because it means so much to me. Because I'm just this dude here in Brazil who is really enjoying the show. So when I get to be able to share this with you, it's just out of pure love. And it's so cool to have so many viewers. I see a lot of comments in wherever I post them in the Facebook groups. Leave comments below, though. I think that's even cooler. So then we can all kind of communicate through the YouTube page. Like and subscribe. I just came off another podcast with my friend Peter. Every Monday, we just talk about what we've watched the week prior. And we talked about Vampires versus the Bronx, this movie called The Monster out of Canada, which looked really scary. American Murder, which was really like, oh my God, just I have a strong stomach to watch that and watch something light afterwards. It's really heavy. And The Witch in the Window. So it went all horror this Monday for whatever reason. We didn't plan it that way. So the horror continues though with Lovecraft Country and Jig-A-Bobo. And we all knew that there was going to be an episode focused on Emmett Till. I didn't know exactly how they were going to go about it because I certainly wouldn't want them to like try to dramatize his death because it is one of the most horrific events in American history. And I was going to say recent American history. I mean, it was 1950s. But guess what? Yeah, recent American history. 1950s was not that long ago. I think a lot of folks tend to forget that. They think all this stuff is way back when. Not really, guys. You know, there's plenty of people alive today who were 8, 10 years old back then and can remember things quite well. And there are plenty of children of those people that are alive today. And we need to think that, hey, either they have been affected by that or both negatively and positively, but I think most negatively in both ways, as in how the PTSD that they may have suffered from living in those times, or the racism that they learned from their parents. Okay, we're only really a generation, big generation away from that. So this episode does a good job at making Emmett Till the driving force of the story. He carries the story. His spirit carries the story, and it's so important because um, this episode is all about spirits and uh, what exactly stays with you, okay, and what and how that affects you. And by the way, the name of the story is Jig-A-Bobo, okay, and a Jig-A-Boo is a racial slur, okay. It comes from the Bantu African word meaning meek or servile, and people would use this term for black people. They would call them jigaboos. So the fact that it's called Jig-A-Bobo, okay, it's making it out to what Emmett Till was seen as he was murdered, okay? He was seen as nothing. So a little play on the word there, Jigaboo and Jigabobo. So when the episode opens, we're going to have to break a whole lot of stuff down here, guys, because this episode was deeper than it seemed. And it starts out at his funeral. And they added some key things in there. And for those that don't know, Emmett Till was killed in the South. He went there on vacation. And that's when we had that episode, maybe episode 4, was it? Where they were in the haunted house. They were in the Ouija board. And he asked, am I going to have a good time on my vacation? And the spirit just said, no, You are not. Okay, so that was a definite prediction of what would happen. Okay, he was kidnapped from his uncle's house in Mississippi. Okay, by the husband of a grocery store owner who thought that Emmett was hitting on her. And guess what? Maybe he did whistle at her. Maybe he did say something. Doesn't mean that he should have died how he died. Okay, and he was kidnapped, and they took him. Okay, from his great uncle's home in the early hours of August 28th, drove him all the way to from Money to Drew in Mississippi. In a barn, they lynched him, and they saw he was also shot, okay, beaten, and his body was weighed down by a fan blade, which was fastened around his neck with a barbed wire and submerged into the river. It was only a few days later that some kids found the body. So, extremely tragic. Okay. And the parents, they decided to have an open casket. They wanted the world to see, look what you have done to our boy. And you can see the picture there on the left. I made it smaller because in another episode, I kind of had the big picture. Although I think it's important for us to see it, you know, I'm just being respectful of people that watch this and maybe don't want to see this image all the time because it may bring some very negative feelings into your spirit. So I made it a little bit smaller, but important to see that. And they had this great line in the beginning where Diane, she's like, what's that smell? And she kind of understood it's the smell of his body. It was so decomposed and so it was horrid, right? So the show was able to give us that horror without showing us anything. I had this great pull-out scene, which you can see on the screen on the right, where it showed everybody that had gone to Chicago because the mom fought to have the body go back up to Chicago to be properly buried. And Emmett Till is considered the kind of a spark for the civil rights movement. There were many sparks, right? But this is definitely one of them. And I did like that they showed these two scenes of a very militant black group saying, we can't take this anymore. We got to fight back. And the other group saying, we need to fight back with the law. We need to change the laws. So right there, we already see this division of what will be more of a Malcolm X versus, I hate to say versus because they were actually friends and they were supposedly Martin Luther King. I don't know if this is a real quote, but supposedly he said that there wouldn't be a me without a Malcolm X. Like I'm the guy that's here letting them beat me up, but Malcolm X is the one breathing fire, up some of these guys' necks so they don't beat me up too bad. Because, so they work together, two sides of the same coin, different methods to achieve the same means. So I like that the show showed this right back in the 1950s, how this was already happening. We find out that Hippolyta did not come back. Okay, so I guess whoever wrote that article last week that I was looking at that said that she didn't come back was right. I thought I heard her say I kind of have to go back because of my daughter, so I would have to rewatch it. And this show is one that requires a lot of rewatching because you will miss so many things on first watch. So if you get a chance to watch episodes again, there's a lot of clues in there. There's a lot of things going on. So this episode focuses on Diana. I'm like, thank you, my other favorite character that I've been wanting to get more backstory on since episode 1, because Hippolyta was definitely my number 1, and Diana was number 2. Okay? And we get it. We get it in the worst way, okay? Because she's totally torn up. She lost her dad, lost her mom, and now she's lost her best friend back to back to back. And that police officer, who we found out has like a black body and a very get outish, a white man's head, a black man's body. He tracks her down because she walked away from the funeral proceedings, and he knows who she is because he found a comic book where Hippolyta killed the cops and disappeared into this other dimension. So he wants to find out information about where she is. And we find out that, well, we already kind of knew this, but he actually shows that he knows magic and he puts a spell on her. Okay? Um, and in this spell, she is now seeing things around her. Okay? Was it Mr. Oh, what was it? There was a advertisement on the wall and the eyes moved. Mr. Not, I'm thinking Mrs. Buttersworth. I forgot now. Leave it in the comments, guys. Um, but she starts seeing things. And someone had mentioned that these two girls, Topsy Turvy, and we'll get into who they were in a second, were actually the two girls that she was throwing rocks at before she got the spell put on her. Because when she walked away from the proceedings, there was these two girls getting ice cream. And they were laughing, and she threw rocks at them. And we see a change in Diana. She was just the sweetest little thing at the beginning of the series, or of this season. In this episode, we can already see how she's hardened a bit, especially after her mother is gone. And when he puts this curse on her, she's hardened even more. She starts going insane. And I want to talk about this issue of black insanity, black madness, which I think was the main theme of this story. But before I do that, okay, what is Topsy Turvy? I'm reading here from a site called 25yearslater.com, okay, and that's where I'm getting the information for, so I want to definitely give credit where it's due, and it was written by Laura Stewart a day ago. So good job, Laura. This is a very well researched article. Oh, and it has a picture there of Mr. Wheat. That's the thing. It was this Cream of Wheat. The Mr. Cream of Wheat guy is the eyes did like the Mona Lisa follow you, but it actually did follow her. So Uncle Tom's Cabin. It starts with Uncle Tom's Cabin, which is the anti-slavery novel, and it really helped change people's attitudes about blacks in America. Some people say that it laid the groundwork for the Civil War. And in the story, Eva, a young wealthy white girl, is saved from drowning by Uncle Tom, a black slave. She encourages her father to buy Tom, and he becomes their head coachman. Eva also befriends Topsy, a young slave girl who has no education and doesn't know of her mother, when her birthday is, or about God. She believes she's just grown. In the early to mid 19th century, Topsy dolls and Topsy Turvy dolls were produced and were later marketed as Topsy and Eva dolls. Okay, so that's where you get these dolls. And if anybody goes on Google and get these little dolls, what happens is that if you hold the doll up, like with its head, imagine you're holding it by the head, and then you and you have the dress down, it looks like she's got these little feet, right? Or maybe you can't even see the feet. And then when you raise the dress like over the head of, like, let's say the black doll, then you'll find out that under there's a white head of Eva. So it kind of flips back and forth. It can change it from a black doll to a white doll. And people say that it was made this way so that young black girls would be prepared for taking care of both a white baby and a black baby. And they're kind of creepy. And so these little girls, yeah, and good luck if you fell asleep after this episode, because these girls were creepy. And they keep following them. It reminded me a little bit, and actually this girl here in 25 Years Later said the same thing. Very reminiscent of the Doppelganger family in Jordan Peele's Us. They move uncannily, dancing too quickly, too flexible, like demented rag dolls. So they were clearly influenced by caricatures of black children, okay, dubbed pickaninnies or jigabos, okay, which were depicted with exaggerated racial features. So if you ever go into like advertisements from the 1920s, 1930s, you'll see these very exaggerated features on blacks with the big lips. It reminds me of like the was it the Chiefs or is it the Indians? I think it's the Indians. It's a baseball team, right? One of these baseball teams has this real ugly caricature of a Native American, which I don't know why people don't think that's offensive, but he's got the big lips and a little feather on his head, and it's like, wow, imagine if somebody had a sports team with like a caricature of a Jewish guy with a big nose and curly hair coming down with a big yarmulke. People would go crazy, right? But I guess we can do it for the Chiefs. He's got like this big grin, like a watermelon man type grin. So yeah, that's another topic, right? Redskins had a decent looking mascot, even though their name wasn't the best, right? So these dolls, they come to life. They're part of the story of Uncle Tom's Cabin. In Uncle Tom's Cabin, by the way, if you've never read the book, I really suggest you read the book, not the stage play. And I only found out recently because I always wondered, why do people call blacks that kind of don't agree with black issues, etc., Uncle Tom's? Never got it, right? Because I read the book, and in the book, Uncle Tom is a hero, and he's not a turncoat. He doesn't turn against his own people and say, "Oh, I'm gonna, say be with the white people because they're so nice." And no, he doesn't do that. He's a hero to the blacks or to black folk in the book. So I suggest you read it. It's very different. What happened is that later they adapted the book to the screen, and in those versions, yeah, Uncle Tom kind of betrays his own people, kind of says, yeah, the white master is bad, but at least he's giving me a home and he's giving me God and he's giving me this. And it's like, okay, that's why people say that black people that go against their own interests just because they can be the house nigger, as they used to call it, are Uncle Tom's, okay? But it has nothing to do with the original book. I definitely recommend reading this original book. But back to Lovecraft, because I want to bring up another book, which is Beloved. Okay, great movie, by the way, too. If you ever got a chance to watch this movie, do it. My friend Renee and I are planning to watch this movie soon. It stars Oprah Winfrey and Danny Glover, written by Toni Morrison, the book, okay? And it deals with something. Toni Morrison deals with a subject in his book which is very interesting, and I think it relates to this episode. At least that's what I thought was the main theme, which is madness, black madness, African American madness, whatever you want to call it. Um, I'm reading here from dergypark.org.tr. It's like, I guess it's like um, it's a thesis paper or something that somebody was writing. Oh, excuse me. Written by Bulent Sersis Tanrin Tanir and Oskan Aksak. Anyway, just real quick here. Black literature in the U.S. portrays experience and history of African Americans. In Beloved, Morrison shows the physical and psychological effects slavery has on an African American woman. Okay? In Beloved, Morrison takes a real life event from African American history and gives special importance to the horrors and tortures of slavery to remind the reader about the past. Beloved is based on a real life story of the slave Margaret Garner on January 28, 1856, about 100 years before this story takes place. Garner kills her 2-year-old daughter and attempts to kill her other 2 children just because she didn't want her children to be sent to the plantation where they worked. Morrison thinks that the horrible issues related to slavery are avoided and forgotten in traditional slave narratives. Therefore, Morrison wants to emphasize the painful and forgotten aspects of slavery. Okay? But the book it's not like what's the word I'm looking for? Ooh, it's late, guys. It's not trying to talk badly, just for admonition. That's the word I'm looking for. It's not an admonition of white folks. It really isn't. It's more a telling it's telling black folks you have to move beyond this horror because this horror was real. And just like after you watch a horror movie, like I just said, I watched that movie American Murder, and I had to watch the South Park Pandemic special afterwards because it stuck with me. Okay, so just even when you watch a movie and it'll stick with you, imagine like a real traumatic event. Somebody tries to kidnap you. Maybe you were mugged. Maybe you were beaten up as a kid, or maybe you were picked on. These little things that happened to you as you were a child and through to young adulthood affect you as an adult. Takes a lot of, say, maybe some psychotherapy, meditation, whatever. I've done it myself to be able to overcome these things. Okay? Now imagine that happening to a whole race of people. Okay? A whole group of people. And that's where you get the black experience in America, where time after time after time after time, you just see these tragic images. And it's not new. Okay? So don't blame the media when we see George Floyd dying in front of us, and you want to blame the drugs, but I saw somebody standing on his knee or kneeling on his knee for 8 minutes when he was already down. So maybe whatever he had in his system aggravated it and he died, But I saw 8 minutes of a man and not, what's the word that they say? Not resisting for 8 minutes, right? I saw a black man getting choked out, saying I can't breathe because he was selling loose cigarettes. Okay? So we see these images. Now, if they weren't on CNN, I'm sure they would be on somebody's Facebook feed and it would have gone viral. So we see these images, okay? And they affect us psychologically. And they can drive a person to madness. And this is what Toni Morrison deals with in Beloved. The madness of this, the guilt of this, of killing her own daughter and attempting to kill the other ones. And what Diana just went through. Her father and mother died, and then her best friend brutally murdered. How do you think this young girl's supposed to feel? So she gets this spell put on her, and she's starting to see these topsy-turvy dolls coming at her, okay? Which, again, coming from Uncle Tom's Cabin, which is a catalyst for the Civil War, for people's changes and attitudes of black. But even still, there's this slave connection where you have these dolls, okay? So you still haven't moved beyond someone that's a second-class citizen that needs to take care of white and black babies, right? Following her. So she's just, this is just another line, like her Montrose, when she's like really going nuts because she's seeing things now. He's trying to talk to her and he's like, listen, that's just how it is. It's like, you got to learn young that you build something, they're going to take it from you. And that's just how black people felt. And some black people still feel, guys. You can't take that feeling away. Doesn't matter. Well, if you want to say, oh, but things are way better and things are... And guess what? I tend to agree. Things are way better today than they were even when I was growing up, which was about in the 90s, let's say. Okay? Things are better. I'm not going to say things are going backwards. But still a long way to go. And there's still traumatic images. Imagine if you're a little boy and you watch George Floyd. That's traumatic. Okay? And it was very difficult for you not to see George Floyd somewhere getting murdered. In the same way, look at Americans, how America as a whole, regardless of race, felt and still feel years after 9/11. Why it is that Jews say never forget. Because that was trauma. And in order for us to not repeat that trauma and learn from it, we cannot forget that. How traumatic was watching those buildings come down. So imagine black folks having had dealt with this and still dealing. So having been dealing with this for a very long time, right? 400 years? When did the first slaves come to America? Was it 1600? Right? So it's deep. When was the first slave in America? There's a date. It was in 1619, right? The first 19 or so Africans to reach the colonies of England were there in Jamestown. Okay. So there's a lot to unpack with what's going on with this girl. It wasn't just a get away from the boogeyman episode for me. It wasn't at all. It was the rage, the madness, finally reaching this little girl. The way her attitude, the way she had this attitude now, that wasn't part of the spell, I don't think. Because she was already kind of hard even before that. It just exacerbated it. The fact that she found the cop that put the spell on her and called him a pig and spit on him, I don't think that was part of the spell. I think that was part of like, this little girl has had it. And that's the story of blacks, of black people in America, of colored people, right? I'm using all these terms. I like black and people of color, but everybody has their own way to talk about um, folks who are not white, okay, living in America. So it's deep. It's a lot of deep shit going on in this episode. A lot of deep shit going on in this episode. Um, so what is going on here? Oh, there you go. Say hello if you're on. Okay, say hello if you're on. So I was kind of going on a little rant there about how masterfully this was done last night or on Sunday night. How masterfully it was done and how masterfully it was presented. The change that this girl went through from being this sweet little girl to madness, being driven into madness. And it's a miracle. It's like it's a testament to the tenacity and strength of black folks that all black people just aren't mad. They there's a stereotypical angry black woman, angry black man. White folks should be kind of thanking their lucky stars that that's just a stereotype. That's not reality. That these people exist, but it's not the majority. They should be thankful that black people are some of the most giving, kind, friendly, down to earth, forgiving motherfuckers on planet Earth. Seriously. Because had I can't say that. Uh, but there's a good chance that had this been done to any other group of people, white America would have been just slaughtered by now, right? Uh, so that's my 2 cents on the power of this episode because there really wasn't that much like story wise. Okay, so she's got these little girls chasing her, and then at the end they kind of get her. It looked like in the preview she does get possessed by one of these girls, who appear to represent just going back to the slave time. It's like the past is still with you, the past is still haunting you, which is the theme of Beloved. Okay, because in Beloved, the baby comes back that Sethi had killed. Okay, and she needs to make amends for that. It's a beautiful story. If you have not watched the movie, watch it. The book is a very difficult read. I'll tell you that much. Toni Morrison is not an easy author. She's kind of like William Faulkner in a way. That, there's time jumps, things are told from different perspectives. Sometimes it takes you a while to realize, oh, wait, she just switched POVs on me and I didn't notice. So it's in that way, it's very cinematic because in a movie, you would know. You're like, okay, now we're seeing from this person's eyes and now we're seeing from that person's eyes. So she does that within her writing style. She's incredible. And I do recommend also the documentary they had about her life that premiered, I think, maybe last year or the year before, right before she died. Really great, okay? But moving ahead, because that's about all I got to say about the Diana. I mean, I was just really, really happy to finally see this episode. I was like, I want to know what's up with this little girl. Because she's a really good actress. And I loved her energy. You know, her and her mom. So I just wanted to see what they would do with these two characters. And amazing. Incredible. On to other stuff, though. We did have Gia arrive. We figured that was going to happen. Love that scene there where you have Letty, which by the way I called Lita all through the last episode. Letitia. Okay, Letty. Guys, I live here in Brazil and getting Portuguese and English and even a little bit of German all mixed up. Because here in Portuguese, leche would be difficult to hear. You hear Lita. Lita is not that uncommon. So the sound came out easier for me of Lita rather than Letty. So we got Letty, Letitia, and they have the showdown. And of course, Letty is a bit jealous of Gia. Why wouldn't she be? And she takes it out on Atticus, who then walks out on her. But then she kind of regrets it. And we find out that Atticus is like, I need to protect myself because he figured out that he's going to die. At least he thinks he is. I don't think he's going to die because that would be like the end of the series. Maybe. Who knows? And we don't really know if Gia saw him die. She saw him in a harrowing position. But is he really going to die? I'm not sure. So he's like, I got to do some magic in order to protect myself. That's what I got to do. Some magic in order to protect myself. And he decides to talk to his dad. So it's great that him and his dad are talking. He asks his dad if he ever cheated on his mom. He's like, no, I had desires, but I never did it. So they're slowly kind of figuring each other out. And we find out that Atticus did go, because that was the big question from last episode. It's like, where did Atticus go? But he went to the future. He was there for a split second, enough for somebody to slip him this book, and it's written by George Freeman. And we were kind of duped. We thought it was the elder, but no, it's the son. It's the son of Atticus and Letty, because we know Letty is pregnant. And in the book, it tells the story of everything that his dad went through and his family went through. So this is the story of their family. So, and it's very meta, which is great. Not a problem. I like meta type stuff. And I've never read the book, Lovecraft Country, but I think some of the changes that are in the book are in this book too. So that's kind of cool. So I think Uncle George survives in the book, if I'm not mistaken. And Diana is actually a boy. Christina is actually a man or something. There's like changes like that. And I think as Atticus is talking, he's like, I know it's about our family. There's a few changes, but the main story is the same. So I don't know how the book ends. So the show doesn't necessarily have to finish follow the ending of this book either. So that could be interesting if because Montrose did ask him, "Hey, how does it end? Does it at least have a happy ending?" And he was kind of ambiguous about his response to that, but this whole meta thing is really cool. And the fact that he went to the future to get it. But he's able to work with his dad and try to get this invincibility spell put on him. Meanwhile, he also finds out that his death is supposed to take place on the autumnal equinox. So in September, right? In just a couple weeks. And Christina is going to kill him because she wants to use his body to get eternal life. That's her goal, which I think is kind of silly. But, that's what she's about, and it's just kind of left us in suspense of how this is going to go down. Another element of this episode, which was interesting, okay, one, the sex scene. Ruby and dude, was it William? I always forget his name, which is actually Christina, using this man's body. He wants to fuck her. Ruby does not want to have sex with him as a black woman because of what just happened with Emmett Till. She wouldn't feel right. So she transforms into the white woman, and then as they're having sex, the special effects were so cool, man. Freakiest. I thought that the sex scene over in Korea was the freakiest sex scene so far this season, with the Kimahu, I forgot now what it's called, this nine-tailed fox, right? Thought that was insane. No, this was insane. As he's doing her, she's bleeding, she's breaking out of her shell. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles reference for anybody old enough. And she becomes Ruby again. Intense scene. And then she has this conversation with Christina where she's like, I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't have sex with you as a black woman. And Christina was like, you know what? Yes, you could. What you're feeling guilty about is that despite all that's going on, you still wanted what you wanted, which is to have sex with a white man. Even if you have to put on a white body to do it, you did it. And that, it's a short scene. I thought it was going to go somewhere else, because Ruby asked Christina, do you feel guilty about the fact that this boy died, and do you feel bad about it? And sometimes I just want to like kill white folks or whatever she said. And I was like, oh my God, this is going to go into preachy mode. I hate preachy stuff with a passion. It's like, I don't need to hear this, right? On this show, at least, I don't. And I like that they flipped it on her. And it was like, no, I don't feel guilty. I don't need to have white guilt. And I don't need to deal with white privilege or whatever. Because shit happens, basically, you know? And it's actually, you're the one that I think feels guilty, um, because you don't know how to deal with the fact that you have the power to get what you want, right? And you still wanted it, which is to have sex with this white man and be able to be this white woman and be able to do whatever you want as this white woman. And I love that flipping of the script because I think there are black folks that deal with this. They deal with the fact that, what do I do? What do I do if I'm a successful black man or a successful black woman, realizing that a lot of my people are never going to get out of where they are? They're going to be born, live, and die in that same spot, on that block, in that government housing or whatever. I made it out. So what can I do? Okay, I can give back to the community, blah blah blah. But what? Yeah, how do I deal with that on a moral level? Right? I think black people deal with this, and especially the ones that aren't the LeBron Jameses or Oprah Winfrey's of the world, who have millions and millions where they can just build houses and whatever, start charitable foundations. Okay, those folks are out there. They do that stuff. The Denzel Washingtons of the world, they do that stuff. But just your average middle class dude who, okay, he's got a nice house, 3-bedroom house, and a car. It's like he doesn't have that much time. He's probably working his ass off to pay that mortgage and pay that car off. He doesn't have time nor the money to give back. What does that mean? Because at the same time, he could also say, but I worked my ass off to get here. If those dudes want to get out of where they were, I left the block, why didn't they leave the block? They're still out there selling. So it's a moral dilemma that I don't think is brought up that much in conversation. I thought this scene brought it up beautifully because Ruby is in that position right now where she has the power to be her own destiny, change her own destiny, drive her own destiny. But what does it mean for everybody else that she's leaving behind? Does she want to give everybody else the same power? Because she can do so much more with this power if not a lot of people have it. So Ruby's turning into an interesting character. She's not my favorite character, although she's a gorgeous woman. She's very sassy, very. But she hasn't done much yet. Other than, of course, she had that great episode, but uh, I haven't gotten deep into the core of Ruby yet. I really want to know what makes her tick. Really want to know what makes her tick. So that episode, this scene kind of went into that a little bit, and it shows that she may have a selfish side to her. But what if it's okay for her to have a selfish side? I think that's an interesting question for Black people to ask themselves. Okay, or people in general who have made it out of something and either can't or don't feel obligated to like go back and like, okay, now I have to help every single person. I mean, it wasn't. I'm not gonna say it wasn't hard uh, to do what I did, but it wasn't impossible. I just kind of stayed in school, studied, got a job, and moved my way up the ranks. It's not the most impossible thing in the world to do, right? Or is it? Interesting question. So, this later on though, we have this weird scene where Christina has paid these two men to meet her by the docks, and they kill her brutally, beat her up, shoot her, tie her neck up on a noose, barbed wire noose, drop her in the river, and it was. I didn't get it at first. I was like, "What the fuck's going on?" Until towards the end where they're tying the noose around her neck. I was like, "Oh, they're doing Emmett Till." Which is what I was wondering, like, how are they going to present the Emmett Till murder? Are they going to do it? Because I think it would be extremely disrespectful for them to try to reenact it. They didn't, but they had Christina reenact it. Because Ruby must have gotten to her a little bit at least, because she said she didn't care. But I guess there's some part of her that was curious. Which makes me wonder again. Christina's like the wild card in this show. You know, is she a good guy? Is she a bad guy? Does she really care about these people or not? I think this is her very bizarre way of showing that she cares. At least cares enough to like, wow, imagine if this had happened to me. What happened to this young boy? Because she gets beaten up, shot, dumped in the river. She comes right back up and you see her like, oh my god, screaming and yelling. It was pretty intense, like most of the time when this show gets dark. They don't hold back at all. um, so let me know what you think about that, because there wasn't much plot wise going on between these two, but they did have these two very interesting scenes, uh, which showed a little bit more of their character, what makes them tick. And speaking of tick, there's Atticus, because the cop, the white black cop, I should get his name right, because something makes me think that he is going to there he is, Captain Lancaster. Okay, and he shows up to the house, and he tries to go in, and he can't because the house has a protective shield. So now Letty, I was about to say Lita, Letty knows that he works with magic, but he knows Letty works with magic too. And by the way, Ruby comes clean about how she's working with Christina, okay, in the meanwhile. And they're shooting on the house. There's like 30 cops just shooting at the house, shooting, shooting, shooting. And then who drops in? It's good old Atticus. And the cops turn to Atticus. They're getting ready to shoot him. And this creature pops out of the ground right before the it's a Shogoth, okay, uh, right before the bullet hits him, okay. So here on this site, 25 years later, they're calling it Christina's pet Shogoth, but I don't know if it's Christina's. I think this is part of the spell that Atticus was able to put on himself with his father. When they did it, nothing happened. So we were to assume it didn't work. But when this happens, obviously he does have some power now. And by the way, little aside, Letty and Christina make a little agreement where she gives Letty part of the Book of Names, the photos that she took of it. And in return, she gives Letty invincibility. So when the cops are shooting, none of the bullets are hitting her. But so now both Letty and Atticus are kind of little super powered. Okay, so we'll see where that leads as far as Christina's plans to try to use Atticus in order to get her eternal life. And that was a cool scene. By the way, special effects have gotten better. I remember in the first episode it wasn't that good, but you know, that's usually what happens during even a season is just things will get better. Costume design, makeup, direction, writing. I mean, most shows improve as they go along, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't keep watching them. So that's about it, guys, for this episode. Not well. There were some important things that happened, right? But not the plot here isn't necessarily moving forward. Just plot elements are being dropped in, which I'm sure are going to lead to one hell of a season finale. And who knows what's going to happen? So much can happen. I don't think Atticus is going to die, but who knows what is going to happen to Atticus? He might get sucked into some portal or something. Who knows? So let me know what you think in the comments. Okay. Before I go, let's just look here at some of the music. I forgot to say what was playing. Episode 7 I Am, we had A Message from the Man in the Moon by Josephine Baker. Baby Let's Make Some Love by the Penguins. Besame Mucho by Josephine Alexander. Piel Canela by Josephine Baker. There's a lot of Josephine Baker music. The Charleston by Paul Whiteman and his orchestra. Lady Marmalade by La Belle. Remember that when Hippolyta was in Paris Fire by Mother's Finest. But now when we get to episode 8, Jig-A-Bobo from last week, we got Cruel Summer by Bananarama, which is a song I really like. Stop That Knocking, which was creepy as hell. Stop that knocking on the door. Stop that knocking on the door. Stop, that was unnerving. And then Naomi Wadler's March for Our Lives speech. That was what was playing in the background in one of the scenes with Diana. And it's worth looking up, guys. I have it right here. And it says here it's by 11-year-old Naomi Wadler. Okay, so this was during the scene where she was in Captain Lancaster's office. And she says, I'm here today to acknowledge and represent the African American girls whose stories don't make the front page of every national newspaper, whose stories don't lead on the evening news. I represent the African American women who are victims of gun violence, who are simply statistics instead of vibrant, beautiful girls full of potential. It is my privilege to be here today. I am, indeed, full of privilege. My voice has been heard. I'm here to acknowledge their stories, to say they matter, to say their names, because I can and I was asked to be. For far too long, these names, these black girls and women, have been just numbers. I'm here to say never again for those girls too. I'm here to say that everyone should value those girls too. People have said that I'm too young to have these thoughts on my own. People have said I am a tool of some nameless adult. It's not true. My friends and I might still be 11 and we might still be in elementary school, but we know life isn't equal for everyone. We know what is right and wrong. We also know that we stand in the shadow of the Capitol, and we know that we have 7 short years until we too have the right to vote. So I'm here today to honor the words of Toni Morrison. If there's a book that you want to read, but it hasn't been written yet, you must be the one to write it. I urge everyone here and everyone who hears my voice to join me in telling the stories that aren't told, to honor the girls, the women of color who are murdered at disproportionate rates in this nation. I urge each of you to help me write the narrative for this world and understand so these girls are never forgotten. Thank you. So that's an extract from the speech by Naomi Wadler at March for Our Lives. And interesting, I didn't notice that she had brought up Toni Morrison in that speech, which kind of connects back to my what I thought the main theme of this episode was: black insanity, literal PTSD of a whole group, nation, race of people because of all the shit we have or may still be experiencing, right? May still experience, I should say. So interesting, right? Interesting connection, guys. So you see how those dots connected? I wasn't expecting to read that right now. It just happened to be on the screen. So yeah, a lot to unpack. A lot to unpack. Thank you guys for listening. I will see you next week for another episode. And just let me know what you thought in the comments. Okay?